"Aha, my proud lover, are you there?" she cried with glee. "My necklace bids fair to beat all others in the world." And she caressed the bead with the tips of her soft white fingers, but was careful that they did not close round the string. Then she returned into the banqueting hall and spoke to the king. "Pray, sire," said she, "send someone at once to find King Pierrot, for, as he was talking to me a minute ago, he suddenly left me, and I am afraid lest I may have given him offence, or perhaps he is ill." The king desired that the servant should seek for King Pierrot all over the grounds, and seek him they did, but nowhere was he to be found, and the old king looked offended. "Doubtless he will be ready tomorrow, in time for the wedding," quoth he, "but we are not best pleased that he should treat us in this way." Princess Fiorimonde had a little maid called Yolande. She was a bright-faced girl with merry brown eyes, but she was not beautiful like Fiorimonde, and she did not love her mistress, for she was afraid of her, and suspected her of her wicked ways. When she undressed her that night, she noticed the gold cord and the one bright bead upon it, and as she combed the princess's hair, she looked over her shoulder into the looking-glass and saw how she laughed, and how fondly she looked at the cord and caressed the bead again and again with her fingers. "That is a wonderful bead on your highness's cord," said Yolande, looking at its reflection in the mirror. "Surely it must be a bridal gift from King Pierrot?" "And so it is, little Yolande," cried Fiorimonde, laughing merrily, "and the best gift he could give me. But I think one bead alone looks ugly and ungainly. Soon, I hope, I shall have another, and another, and another, all as beautiful as the first." Then Yolande shook her head and said to herself, "This bodes no good." Next morning all was prepared for the marriage, and the princess was dressed in white satin and pearls, with a long white lace veil over her, and a bridal wreath on her head. And she stood in waiting among her grandly dressed ladies, who all said that such a beautiful bride had never been seen in the world before. But just as they were preparing to go down to the fine company in the hall, a messenger came in great haste, summoning the princess at once to her father the king, as he was much perplexed. "My daughter," cried he, as Fiorimonde, in all her bridal array, entered the room where he sat alone, "what can we do? King Pierrot is nowhere to be found. I fear lest he may have been seized by robbers, and basely murdered for his rich clothes, or carried away to some mountain, and left there to starve. My soldiers are gone far and wide to seek him, and we shall hear of him ere day is done. But where there is no bridegroom, there can be no bridal." "Then let it be put off, my father," cried the princess, "and tomorrow we shall know if it is for a wedding or a funeral we must dress." And she pretended to weep, but even then she could hardly keep from laughing. So the wedding guests went away, and the princess laid aside her bridal dress, and all waited anxiously for news of King Pierrot, and no news came. So at last everyone gave him up for dead, and mourned for him, and wondered how he had met his fate. Princess Fiorimonde put on a black gown, and begged to be allowed to live in seclusion for 1 month, in which to grieve for King Piero. But when she was again alone in her bedroom, she sat before her looking-glass, and laughed till tears ran down her cheeks. And Yolande watched her, and trembled when she heard her laughter. She noticed, too, that beneath her black gown the princess still wore her gold cord, and did not move it, night or day. The month had barely passed away when the king came to his daughter, and announced that another suitor had presented himself, whom he should much like to be her husband. The princess agreed quite obediently to all her father said, and it was arranged that the marriage should take place. This new prince was called Prince Hildebrand. He came from a country far north, of which one day he would be king. He was tall and fair and strong, with flaxen hair and bright blue eyes. When Princess Fiorimonde saw his portrait, she was much pleased, and said, "By all means let him come, and the sooner the better." So she put off her black clothes, and again great preparations were made for a wedding, and King Piero was quite forgotten. Prince Hildebrand came, and with him many fine gentlemen, and they brought beautiful gifts for the bride. The evening of his arrival all went well, and again there was a grand feast, and Fiorimonde looked so beautiful that Prince Hildebrand was delighted. And this time she did not leave her father's side, but sat by him all the evening. Early next morning at sunrise, when everyone was still sleeping, the princess rose and dressed herself in a plain white gown, and brushed all her hair over her shoulders, and crept quietly downstairs into the palace gardens. Then she walked on till she came beneath the window of Prince Hildebrand's room, and here she paused and began to sing a little song as sweet and joyous as a lark's. When Prince Hildebrand heard it, he got up and went to the window and looked out to see who sang. And when he saw Fiorimonde standing in the red sunrise light, which made her hair look gold and her face rosy, he made haste to dress himself and go down to meet her. "How, my princess," cried he, as he stepped into the garden beside her. "This is indeed great happiness to meet you here so early. Tell me, why do you come out at sunrise to sing by yourself?" "I come that I may see the colors of the sky, red, blue, and gold," answered the princess. "Look, there are no such colors to be seen anywhere, unless, indeed, it be in this bead which I wear here on my golden cord." "What is that bead, and where did it come from?" asked Hildebrand. "It came from over the sea, where it shall never return again," answered the princess, and again her eyes began to sparkle with eagerness, and she could scarcely conceal her mirth. "Lift the cord off my neck and look at it near, and tell me if you ever saw one like it." Hildebrand put out his hands and took hold of the cord, but no sooner were his fingers closed around it than he vanished, and a new bright bead was slung next to the first one on Fiorimonde's chain, and this one was even more beautiful than the other. The princess gave a long, low laugh, quite terrible to hear. "Oh, my sweet necklace," cried she, "how beautiful you are growing. I think I love you more than anything in the world besides." Then she went softly back to bed without anyone hearing her, and fell sound asleep, and slept till Yolande came to tell her it was time for her to get up and dress for the wedding. The princess was dressed in gorgeous clothes, and only Yolande noticed that beneath her satin gown she wore the golden cord, but now there were 2 beads upon it instead of 1. Scarcely was she ready when the king burst into her room in a towering rage. "My daughter," cried he, "there is a plot against us. Lay aside your bridal attire and think no more of Prince Hildebrand, for he too has disappeared and is nowhere to be found." At this the princess wept and entreated that Hildebrand should be sought for, far and near. But she laughed to herself and said, "Search where you will, yet you shall not find him." And so again a great search was made, and when no trace of the prince was found, all the palace was in an uproar. The princess again put off her bride's dress and clad herself in black, and sat alone and pretended to weep. But Yolande, who watched her, shook her head and said, "More will come and go before the wicked princess has done her worst." A month passed, in which Fiorimonde pretended to mourn for Hildebrand. Then she went to the king and said, "Sire, I pray that you will not let people say that when any bridegroom comes to marry me, as soon as he has seen me, he flies rather than be my husband. I beg that suitors may be summoned from far and near, that I may not be left alone unwed." The king agreed, and envoys were sent all the world over to bid any who would come and be the husband of Princess Fiorimonde. And come they did, kings and princes from south and north, east and west, King Adrian, Prince Sigbert, Prince Olgar, and many more. But though all went well till the wedding morning, when it was time to go to church, no bridegroom was to be found. The old king was sadly frightened, and would fain have given up all hope of finding a husband for the princess. But now she implored him, with tears in her eyes, not to let her be disgraced in this way. And so suitor after suitor continued to come, and now it was known far and wide that whoever came to ask for the hand of Princess Fiorimonde vanished and was seen no more of men. The courtiers were afraid, and whispered under their breath, "It is not all right. It cannot be." But only Yolande noticed how the beads came upon the golden thread, till it was well nigh covered, yet there was always room for 1 bead more. So the years passed, and every year Princess Fiorimonde grew lovelier and lovelier, so that no one who saw her could guess how wicked she was. In a far-off country lived a young man whose name was Florestan. He had a dear friend named Gervaise, whom he loved better than anyone in the world. Gervaise was tall and broad and stout of limb, and he loved Prince Florestan so well that he would gladly have died to serve him. It chanced that Prince Florestan saw a portrait of Princess Fiorimonde, and at once swore he would go to her father's court and beg that he might have her for his wife. And Gervaise in vain tried to dissuade him. "There is an evil fate about the Princess Fiorimonde," quoth he. "Many have gone to marry her, but where are they now?" "I don't know or care," answered Florestan, "but this is sure, that I will wed her and return here and bring my bride with me." So he set out for Fiorimonde's home, and Gervaise went with him with a heavy heart. When they reached the court, the old king received them and welcomed them warmly, and he said to his courtiers, "Here is a fine young prince, to whom we would gladly see our daughter wed. Let us hope that this time all will be well." But now Fiorimonde had grown so bold that she scarcely tried to conceal her mirth. "I will gladly marry him tomorrow, if he comes to the church," she said. "But if he is not there, what can I do?" And she laughed long and merrily, till those who heard her shuddered. When the prince's ladies came to tell her that Prince Florestan was arrived, she was in the garden, lying on the marble edge of a fountain, feeding the gold fish who swam in the water. "Bid him come to me," she said, "for I will not go any more in state to meet any suitors, neither will I put on grand attire for them. Let him come and find me as I am, since all find it so easy to come and go." So her ladies told the prince that Fiorimonde waited for him near the fountain.